Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rico.
I am your other co-host, Tony Borrego.
And this is the podcast known as Relatively Sound, the podcast that is rocking the suburbs. Today, we are back with our album for album series for this month. Last week, we talked about Tony's pick with Mark Lanigan's album, Phantom Radio. And this week, we are doing one of two Ben Folds episodes for this month. This week, I gave Tony Ben Folds' first solo album titled Rockin the Suburbs, released in 2001. And we've already mentioned Ben Folds a lot on this podcast. And spoiler alert, next week, we're going to have another Ben Folds episode, hopefully, if everything goes according to plan. And we've already mentioned that Tony and I were a little late to the Ben Folds party. We only got into them during the Ben Folds 5 reunion album. And then, we diverged a little bit. Tony is the bigger fan, I would say, Ben Folds 5. He enjoys all, 4 of their albums. And I went and listened to all of Ben Folds' solo albums. And there's probably points where I'd say I almost prefer them sometimes to some Ben Folds 5 albums. Tony has heard bits and parts to certain Ben Folds solo albums. We did review his most recent album, What Matters Most, last month. So Tony has heard that one in its entirety. But he has not heard Rockin the Suburbs in its entirety, although he is familiar with some of the songs. So Tony, why don't you go ahead and let us know what songs were you familiar with from this album going into it this month?
So the songs that I was familiar with were actually a good amount of them, but I didn't know them in detail. So Annie Waits, Zach and Sarah, Still Fighting It, Not the Same, the title track, and The Luckiest. So that's 6 songs right there. But the only ones I really knew well were like Rockin the Suburbs and probably Zach and Sarah, just because of you listening to them a lot.
And we should say the reason I was not planning on giving Tony Rockin the Suburbs for this month, but the reason we did this is because Tony and I are going to be seeing Ben Folds next week from the recording of this episode. And we are seeing him on his tour for his latest album, What Matters Most. And looking at the set list, half the set list is him playing Rockin the Suburbs songs, and the other half is like him playing songs from his new album. And when Tony and I bought tickets, he was like, well, why don't you give me Rockin the Suburbs? Like, because I had toyed with giving it to him already because it's probably my favorite Ben Folds record of anything he's ever released. And it probably is a top 20 album of mine of all time. And we'll get into that later. So it kind of just made sense for me to give this album to Tony, even though he is familiar with almost half the track list. But I thought it was a good idea. So that's what we're doing for this month. So Tony, on first listen, even with knowing half the, or at least knowing a couple of the songs in their entirety, and as someone who is a Ben Folds 5, I would say stan, you love them. You're a super fan.
Love each of their 4 records, yeah.
What did you think of this album?
Well, so let me just kind of preface it with, not really my history with Ben Folds as a solo artist, but kind of just my experience from, hearing songs from you. I could tell that there's definitely some good nuggets in there, but a lot of the songs seem kind of maybe a little bit lightweight, unrefined, maybe a little more pop than I would have liked at the time that I heard it. But I definitely have a little more maturity, more appreciation. I really enjoyed What Matters Most, the album I reviewed. I really enjoyed it. So I was definitely excited to hear the album. So overall, my thoughts were, what really stood out to me was definitely the energy of some of the songs. Songs like Zach and Sarah, title track, even Annie Waits. Like there's this big energy to them that is pop. There's a lot of details in the production and really catchy stuff. This is a very catchy album. And let's just start with the title, or not the title, sorry, the opening track. Annie Waits, I used to think that song was annoying, and you actually, if I'm not wrong, that's one of your favorites from the record. And just listening, first time in years, I thought it was a great song, and I really liked it. So that kind of, was like really promising going in this album. Um, and maybe let's just jump straight into the songs. Uh, Gosh, so I'll say
Where to
this. I'll say
start,
this.
right?
Where to start? I'll say this. I liked all the songs except for two of them. Can you guess which two they are?
Well, let me just make sure you probably listen to the just like the CD version of this album without the bonus song Hero Song, right?
Oh yeah, I didn't even know that was a part of this.
Yeah, well, it was a Japanese CD deluxe track, and then for some reason it's on the US vinyl version of the album. So I own the vinyl, the re-release of it, and it's like actually like in the middle of the album track list, which is kind of weird.
Oh,
But so if I were to guess your two songs that you didn't love, oh, that's kind of hard. I'm gonna go with The Luckiest because it is a ballad. Some people consider it cheesy, including my girlfriend Lindsay, who isn't a Ben Folds fan anyway. I'm gonna say that one was not your favorite, and then I'm there's gonna be like one that I love that you don't like. So I'm gonna assume maybe it's maybe Gone. No, not
eh.
God. Not God. Sorry. I don't know actually. I don't know. I think the luckiest for sure, but I don't know about the other one.
So yeah, the luckiest, and there's so much good to talk about this album. So let's just kind of maybe crank out the two biggest weak points. So you were right. The luckiest, I was not a fan of. I just thought the lyrics weren't very cohesive or really that impactful to me. Thought
Oh,
the music was
really?
kind of boring. And those same things I can say about Fred Jones Part 2.
Okay. I kind of thought because they're kind of similar in at least the tone of the music. And I will say Fred Jones Part 2 is my least favorite on the album. So actually we're not that far off in that sense.
Yeah, and I would probably say I maybe like Fred Jones a little more than the luckiest because it's about like 40 seconds shorter than the luckiest.
But really quick, while we're talking about Fred Jones Part 2, do you know the background of the song?
Well, I know that on Ben Folds 5, whatever and ever, amen record, that the song Cigarette um says Fred Jones. That's like the protagonist in it. But that's about it. I think I read that like the lyrics from Cigarette were like from a newspaper article. I don't know if that's actually true or not.
That is true.
Okay. It's a good
And
start.
this was just him expanding on this character of Fred Jones, which I mean, in the original song Cigarette, it's about like this guy who like leaves his wife who is like has like I think brain cancer. Um and then Fred Jones Part 2, it's about him like getting fired from his job, which I don't know if there's any more correlation like to the real story that he read in the newspaper. Um but it's supposed to be a continuation of the character and he sings about he's a lot of Ben Folds songs, Ben Folds 5 songs. There's a lot of characters, and he sings about Fred Jones again in Fred Jones Part 2, which is why it's called Part 2. But why was it your least? Why was that one of your least favorite? Because it's also mine, and I have for me, it's just because I just find the music boring and it's just not catchy enough for me. And like you said, this album has so much catchy stuff that when you get a song that isn't catchy, it kind of drags the album down a little.
Yeah, and so for me, like Fred Jones and the Luckiest, musically, it kind of feels like something that you would hear maybe in like a therapist waiting room, like kind of like something like Canon and D, except without all the complexity. Not saying complex makes it better, but the kind of the big thing for me with Fred Jones Part 2 is that this, I mean, maybe there is a story to it, which is good, but just like with the way he sings it too, it's just boring and annoying. I don't really like the background, the low harmony he adds later. It just, I don't know. It doesn't sound refined enough to really be like beautiful to me, but it's also not raw enough to be like really emotional to me, such as maybe like Evaporated from the Ben Folds 5 track. I know that sounds super critical, and it is a little critical, but I don't know. Artists that I really enjoy, of this caliber, and who have cranked out plenty of wonderful songs, you do have to hold them kind of to a higher standard. So for me, this was definitely a turnoff. Like I'll say this: Fred Jones Part 2 and The Luckiest do not get a heart on my liked songs for Spotify.
Okay, so I will defend The Luckiest. Fred Jones Part 2, I won't really defend because a lot of people actually love Fred Jones Part 2.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would say a lot of people say it's like their favorite, but I think we're a little bit in the minority of not loving it. I think that Fred Jones Part 2 has interesting lyrics, but yeah, the melodies and the piano playing is just a little bit too straightforward, straight ahead. You get some harmonies by actually, I don't know if you knew this, the lead singer of the band Cake. He actually,
Oh, really?
you hear another male voice like halfway through Fred Jones Part 2, and that's the lead singer of Cake.
I was wondering because it didn't quite sound like Ben.
Yeah. I mean, they've done the song live a couple times together because they've done some tours together. Cake is that's a very interesting band. We'll get to probably maybe another episode, but
Yeah, their cover of War Pigs.
Or no, their cover of
I Will Survive.
I Will Survive. Yeah, that's the one I always think of.
Yeah,
we won't talk about that. Actually, I've never even heard their cover of War Pigs, but
don't.
Yeah, so Fred Jones Part 2, like I do think it's interesting that he's continuing the character from Ben Folds 5 song Cigarette, but other than that, it's a little too long. It's not even that long of a song, but it just feels like it drags on. So I get that. I get that why that's one of your least favorites.
I like the idea, you know, of continuing it, but it just completely misses the mark.
And sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. So you were gonna make a case for The Luckiest, and I will say I don't think the lyrics are all awful or anything like that. I just don't really like the verse about like if what he's talking about, like if he was older and he like saw them passing on a bike or something.
Okay.
Like,
well, so yeah, so let me let me defend the song because the song The Luckiest was originally written for a movie.
Really?
Now I'm blanking. I think the movie's called About Time. I think it was written for another film. Yeah, because the song is featured in the movie called About Time, which came out in 2001. It's like a romantic film. But I think he actually originally wrote the song for another film called Loser in 2000 that never made it on the film. So he kind of wrote the song knowing it was going to probably be in like in a romantic comedy, or not even comedy, romantic film. So it's very much a ballad, romantic love ballad. This is a lot of people, some people, this is their favorite Ben Folds song because they have it attached to like their significant other. And Ben Folds, like lately, every February, he'll actually handwrite the lyrics to the song and like sign it like sheet music and sell it on his website because people will give it to their significant other. So it's definitely kind of
a cool idea.
It's definitely like a couple song. And I actually think it has some creative lines. Like there's a line where he says, "What if I had been born 50 years before you in a house on a street where you lived? Maybe I'd be outside as you pass by on your bike. Would I know?" Like, I like that line because he's like singing like, what if we were born in different times of our lives? Like, would I know you're my soulmate? Because this song's about pretty much someone's soulmate. He's saying I'm the luckiest, you know, that basically, you know, I have you in my life. And then, yeah, there's a line where he's like, next door. Well, so that was the line that you were talking about. What if we were born 50 years apart and you pass by on your bike?
Yeah, it just didn't really hit for me.
It is a little bit of a corny line, I will say that one, but I think it's interesting. I like the line in the last verse where he's singing about an old man in his 90s next door passed away in his sleep, and then his wife passed away a couple of days later, because you do hear that a lot about an older married couple where one of them will pass away and then days later the other one passed away, like Johnny Cash with his wife. So I do like that line because that line, that, you know, romantic vision of like dying when you're older
until death do us part.
Yeah, then your loved one dies right after you because, like, you know, they were your whole life. So I do like that line, but I will say this song is definitely on the corny side. It's very sentimental to the point where it's a little too much. And musically, it's very simple. Even with the strings added, it is just like here's a ballad, here's a love song. So I
Very
totally get
forgettable music.
I totally get why you wouldn't like the song, and I would not put this in my top 5 from the album for sure.
And his vocals at this point in time, I think, kind of also contribute to why I don't care for it. I don't mind his voice. I like his singing, but I think on this track it doesn't really hit hard, once again with kind of the execution for me. Like if he were to sing the song now, I think I would enjoy it more because I think he's a much better singer now and maybe could so just deliver it in a way that I would prefer.
Yeah.
But okay, that's enough about my gripes.
And it's not a great way to end the album. I never am a fan of ending on a ballad, especially a sappy romantic love ballad. So I agree with you, not best way to end the album either.
So yeah, so sorry that we had to start off so aggressively, but I just kind of want to get those off my chest. Now I feel like I can talk about the album and just be really, really free with it. So I will say for me, throughout the album, I noticed that there were a lot of moments that kind of felt Ben Folds 5e.
Which
And
makes
those
sense.
moments made it, yeah, it makes sense, of course, but it made it easier for me to get into the album, kind of with those things in mind. The biggest song I can think of that sounds just like a Ben Folds 5 song, Carrie Kathy. It's selfless, cold, and composed.
Interesting. That is not what I would have said.
What do you mean? It sounds just like it.
Like musically? Are you talking about the vibe, or like are you talking about like specific like chords and specific musical moments?
Like the chords and even the main hook. There's always someone carrying, always someone carrying. That's like literally the build up in Selfless, Cold, Composed. What does he say in there? Oh my god, that's gonna bug me now. But a lot of it is the chords.
I know what you're talking about now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but like don't like I find Selfish, Cold, and Composed to be like a little bit more jazzy, a little bit like it's definitely more like of a serious sounding song. And neither I would really call ballads, although Carrie and Kathy might be more of that ballad sound. But I feel like Carrie and Kathy is more sad, whereas Selfless, Cold, and Composed, maybe you can interpret it as sad, but I also think it's just kind of like it's both are mature songs. But I don't know. I feel like Carrie and Kathy has a little bit of a darker undertone for some reason, and that's because of the lyrics, which I'm curious if you picked up on that on the lyrics.
Yeah, no, I did. And I think the big difference, like let's say with the Selfless, Cold, and Composed comparison, I think the big difference is that the drums and the bass are much more playful in the Ben Folds 5 version, as you could imagine. But I think the piano, the melody, the chords, even I don't know what you would call it on piano, not the picking of the piano, but the pattern in which he plays, it's very reminiscent of it. But this was one that I did like, and it was interesting hearing a Ben Folds take of a Ben Folds 5 song. I'm sorry if you don't see it that way, but that's how I saw it. So that was one that I liked. And also as well, I like this one because I felt like I could kind of understand the lyrics a little better. I found that there was times on this album where, there'd be a song and maybe I think I understand the lyrics, but then there's a section that feels kind of random, or for someone like Ben Folds, who is very specific, I mean, there's 7 different names of people in just the titles of this album. Sometimes he felt kind of vague, but I feel like with Carrie and Kathy, I really did like the lyrics in it. And I thought they felt complete. There was lines I liked. It's kind of interesting, the whole, one night she climbed into the picture frame, out in the frozen air and out of sight. Like a line like that, I don't think I could really hear in a Ben Folds 5 song, but it works really well in this song.
So, but I'm curious, did you get this? Because the song has kind of a story in a sense.
Well, why don't you tell me what the story is?
So I will say, warning: this song does deal with suicide. So
that's what I figured.
Yeah, warn if people don't want to listen to that. But yeah, the song's about this character Kathy, who it starts off with her talking about looking at her window. And it almost seems like the song is about her maybe being afraid of the outside world, maybe being too much for her. And as the song goes on, the protagonist of the song, I guess through like Ben's point of view, he's singing about this person named Kathy, who's like, she's always being carried. The chorus is, there's someone always carrying Kathy. And you could say that could be like people are always having to help her when she's down, or maybe she relies on people. And there's lines where he's like, it's just, she's different when it's just me and her. But he talks about how he was too self-absorbed with himself to realize she was going through these issues, whether it be depression or whatnot. And the bridge of the song, which to me is like the most powerful part of the song, she climbs out her window and commits suicide. And I love the like vivid lyrics of how like, you know, she climbs into the picture frame, which is actually her window, but she sees it as a picture frame to to outside, to the outside world. And then the song kind of somberly ends with her brothers literally carrying Kathy, like her casket, when people at a funeral, like family members will carry the casket. So at the end, it's like they're literally carrying Kathy.
And that actually really reminds me of the Elliott Smith song from A Basement on a Hill, King's Crossing, a song that talks about like addiction and stuff. Like like at the end, he sings, "Don't let me be carried away," and like he changes it. I can't remember which one he says first. "Don't let me get carried away. Don't let me get carried away," and then says, "Don't let me be carried away." And it kind of feels like he's implying like the same thing, death, and like literally being carried away. So that was interesting to hear that, like, for Ben Folds, who I consider to be a very upbeat, silly artist, he definitely did do probably the most sad song I've heard him sing before.
Well, let's also not forget their Ben Folds 5's most famous hit is about abortion with Brick.
Yeah, okay, I guess you're right. I do like Brick, but I never think about that song because I'm like, okay, yeah, it's Brick.
So, but I'm glad that you did appreciate the lyrics, and even if you didn't know the true meaning of the song, it sounded like it still moved you in a way.
Right.
So that was
because you're so familiar with the album, it's cool to hear kind of a real fleshed out, like, this is what it is about. Here's what people gather.
Yeah, and not every song on this album is super specific, and we'll probably get into that. But like that is the one of the songs on the album where it's a pretty clear storyline. You do have to kind of read between some of the lines, but if you just read the lyrics without listening to the song, you can probably get to the conclusion of what the song's about. But I would never have considered it a Ben Folds 5 song. That's very interesting to hear your take on that.
Yeah, that was just something that jumped out to me on first listen, and I wouldn't even say that it was like one of my favorites on the first listen. It is one I really like though. Yeah. So here, let's switch to, we've been talking about a lot of like kind of sad songs, right? Let's switch to something a lot more upbeat. So maybe the song I was most familiar with other than the title track was Zach and Sarah, because you really enjoyed it. And the one thing that I always think about every time I think of the song is that the background vocals kind of remind me of Zoe 101. Like that really like pop harmony layered things, like you kind of hear it in Drake and Josh too.
Yeah, we're talking about Nickelodeon TV shows for like
like 12-year-olds maybe?
Tweens, yeah.
Tweens, yeah, there you go. But that one, it's just a fun song. It's hard to dislike. There's fun lyrics in there. The whole Zach without a C and Sarah without an H is pretty funny. It's humorous. It doesn't get too old where like I cringe every time I hear it. I think my only complaint with the song is when he starts talking about his layaway plans. It just feels really random, working on a submarine. But that's a very Ben Folds thing to do in at least in my perspective.
I think there's some deeper meaning we can dive into it if you want to.
Please elaborate, because I have a feeling that this podcast is mostly going to be me, you filling me in with all my questions I have with this album.
Well, okay, so the layaway plan part, no one's confirmed this, but I think he calls his dad, the character in the song, Zach, calls his dad to talk about layaway plans. I think specifically because the song takes place in a guitar shop.
Right.
And I think he's calling his dad to ask about layaway plans for buying a new guitar, because Zach's at the shop with Sarah and he's playing her songs on guitars, like, testing out guitars as one does when they go to like Guitar Center. So I think that's what that line has to do about. Now, the song itself deals with not mostly Zach, it's mostly about Sarah. And I think the song, there's two interpretations. Either she's a clairvoyant and she can like see into the future, or more realistically, she has some she has like schizophrenia, because there's a line where she where she sings about um what's the lyric like I should have had the lyrics pulled up for this
Voices
other
from
my bad.
inside, like that whole thing.
Yeah, like she talks about hearing voices and seeing things that aren't there. And I think like throughout the song, she's like going through these like almost manic schizophrenia episodes. And there's like a
Really?
yeah, because
Are you sure?
because in the bridge, she she's singing about how she's talking to like the salesman and she's telling him like how you'll die in your car and why does it got to be dark and you're working in a submarine like that.
Oh, and
That's why the song feels like it's all over the place lyrically. Like it, there's parts where it feels like it almost doesn't make sense. And and a lot of people I think agree with me that the song is about her having like schizophrenic episodes.
okay, see, because okay, so the before that whole like bridge section, where they're talking about her having spells where she lost time, seeing the future, hearing voices, but when they end it with the kind of voices she would soon learn to deny because at home they got her smacked. I thought that this section was her talking and daydreaming about like her dreams, like maybe as being a guitarist or something, but her parents don't approve, and that's why, she kind of like shuts out that dream. And then, but maybe that's why Zach playing out, her favorite songs and stuff is so exciting to her or something.
But you know why I don't think that's true?
Why?
Because in the first verse, the very first line, it's Sarah spelled without an H was getting bored on a PV amp in 1984. She doesn't want to be at this guitar store with Zach. I don't think she's a musician. I don't think she's the one playing the guitars. He is. So you're right. Maybe she's daydreaming while he's like trying to show her guitars and stuff, and she could, she couldn't care less. But it's the voices. Like, okay, she saw the future. She heard voices from inside. The kind of voices she would soon learn to deny. That's why I think it's like she's hearing voices in her head. She's like seeing things. Like I do
So
understand where
is Zach a figment of her imagination then, or do you think Zach's actually a character?
I know. I think he's a character mostly because at the end of the song, after having all these like visions and stuff, like because the last verse, she's talking about how she sees lights and it's almost like she's seeing like a rave like in her mind. Like
I was gonna say,
she's
like,
strange machines repeating beats and thumping bass, English face. It sounds like a music rave like in the 90s, like in England.
visions of pills that put you in a loving trance. They're doing ecstasy here.
Yeah, that make it possible for all white boys to dance, which I love that line, the way it rolls off the tongue. And then the very last line before it goes back to the chorus is, and when Zach finished Sarah's song, Sarah clapped. So, excuse me, the whole time she's like seeing all these things happening in her mind while Zach's playing the guitar, and he finishes the song. She like goes back to normal. She starts clapping, like almost to elude the point that like Zach doesn't even notice that she's like in a whole nother place in her mind. That's what I think.
So this is interesting because this actually wasn't one of the songs that I thought we were going to discuss the lyrics so in depth, and much less interpret them much differently. But maybe just to kind of maybe shift off a little bit, I will say I think the music is really exciting in this song. Something I noticed with the album too is that a lot of like the instrumental melodies are thrown in at great times. So like when they enter the chorus and he says Zach and Sarah, and there's kind of like a little bit of a pause, that keyboard melody that comes in is super catchy. And I feel like the dynamics of the song do let the lyrics really shine and become more prominent. I think this is another example of a song where like the cadence and the delivery rhythmically and melodically makes the lyrics so much stronger, because at least like the whole you all die in your cars, why's it got to be dark, that is a very memorable part of the song to me, whether or not I well, I mean, depending on the meaning now, maybe I like it more than I thought, but
Yeah, well, on the submarine line could also be her referencing like people who work at like normal jobs, like working at a guitar shop. Like she's saying, you're working in a submarine, like you're working in a confined space, because in a submarine it's very small and limited. It's like claustrophobic, you know.
right, and she has these daydreams of being a rock star, so that's why she's telling them, You're gonna
Or
die in your car, dude.
or she's
In traffic.
schizophrenic and she actually thinks they're in a submarine. That could be true too. Like it's hard to tell with Ben Folds. You don't know if he's being serious and talking about schizophrenia, or if he's just talking about daydreams. It's hard to tell sometimes.
There's a lot more ambiguity on this album lyrically than I really expected.
And I also love the part right after that bridge where they're kind of going back into the main hook musically of the song, where in just some high pitched falsetto vocals, you hear him go, asshole.
Yeah, that was also pretty funny.
That's
This song is definitely probably one of the funniest.
Yeah, just to throw out like random swears is just funny. But yeah, musically, it's one of my favorites. It's like maybe one of the most energetic. It's super catchy. It's very poppy. Like it's more poppy than Ben Folds 5 for sure. You're missing fuzz bass. But it's still energetic.
So I know I'm just jumping around all over the place here, but you had mentioned him just kind of randomly swearing. There's another song on here where he does that. Fired.
Yes.
And this is one that I have kind of mixed feelings about. Well, actually, no, not really. I feel pretty set in stone, actually. I really enjoy the music, and like the chorus is fantastic with like the falsetto. It feels like a better version of A Scent of Stan. But that's one where I think the lyrics really take the song down a notch for me. Like, because they're not very funny, but they're also not very meaningful or interesting, or there's not even really standout words for me in the song. So it kind of sucks. And not the song, the lyrics for me. And there's like a solo, which is fitting in the song, but it's a little bit underwhelming, especially like going back into that last chorus. But it does have the good moment at the end where it gets all rocked out, and then he does yell motherfucker. So this is one I have no idea how you're gonna feel about it, because like I know how you feel about Annie Waits and Zach and Sarah, but I have no idea what your thoughts on Fired are. And I'm not sure. Do you agree with me, or
I kind of agree with you actually. Like it's not on my top 5. It's one that had to grow on me. I think on first listen, it was almost a little too, because like the piano, like the style he's playing almost sounds like not like a show tune, but like there's something kind of flashy about it to where it almost sounds too like an old fashioned song, like a song archaic from like the 50s or something. I don't know, like it's but it still has that pop element to it, the production. Lyrically, I don't ever go to the song for the lyrics other than like where he yells motherfucker at the end, but this one,
motherfucker is your best lyric in the song. I think that says something.
No, but the song is great for the harmonies and the parts, like the music, when the part where they go, everyone is here is fired, everyone here is like that part is so catchy.
Right. Like I like the vocals, just really not the lyrics. And I mean the chorus is like maybe the best chorus on the album for me.
Yeah, the chorus is like like the rhythmic part to it is fantastic. Even the part where he's like, I just want to walk away, where he's like kind of sings the false, that gives me like 70s vibes, like that part, the harmonies. The song the album ends kind of weird, because like this does not feel like the last song on the album. It does feel like the second to last song, but then The Luckiest doesn't really feel like a good closer. So the album does I think end a little worse definitely than it begins, because it began with Anna Waits and Zach and Sarah I think is fantastic.
It could have ended with Still Fighting It if they were going to do a ballad.
True. How do you feel about Still Fighting It? Because Still Fighting It is, I would say, we're talking about, there's like 4 slower songs in some. Still Fighting It, Fred Jones Part 2, Carrying Kathy, and The Luckiest. You don't like The Luckiest or Fred Jones. You do enjoy Carrying Kathy. So how about Still Fighting It?
Okay, let me just start off by saying this. So I try not to have any previous judgments, but I actually thought Still Fighting It was the luckiest. Kind of. Like I thought I liked it just as much as I thought I liked Still Fighting It as much as I liked The Luckiest. But when I listened to it, I actually really enjoyed a lot of things about it. I can appreciate it. It's kind of another one though where the music is kind of forgettable. Some of the lyrics are kind of randomly silly, or like they're funny the first time, but then they're just kind of in the way on repeated listens. But what really makes the song for me is the chorus, especially because the song gets kind of staccato, we're still fighting it. And then the part that actually really that actually like really hit hard, and I was like, wow, okay, this song feels a lot kind of meaningful. Like, I can feel it. Is when he says, I'm assuming he's talking to his son, and you're so much like me. I'm sorry. Like, I was like, whoa, because I don't see. I mean, I kind of see Ben Folds as quite a confident person who probably likes himself a lot. Um, and so it was kind of cool to hear him be kind of like really vulnerable and like, sorry that you're like me, like sorry you're gonna have to deal with the struggles of life, and like, I don't know, it just felt like him really being like vulnerable,
Yeah. I
if that
mean,
makes sense.
you're definitely right. The song is literally a song he wrote for his son. He actually has twins,
Oh,
and this is about his son, Lewis. Um, and then later on his second solo album, Songs for Silverman, he wrote a song called Gracie, which is the name of the other twin, his daughter, Gracie. He was like, well, my son got his song on an album. I got to give Gracie her own song. Um, but still fighting it, unlike Gracie, Gracie is like really specifically about like the daughter. And there's like, it's kind of a sweet, just lighthearted song. Still fighting it, like you said, it has layers because it starts off, like you said, very funny. It has lyrics that are literally, you want a Coke, maybe some fries. The roast beef combo is only $9.99, $9.95. Like those lyrics seem really like out of place, not for a Ben Folds song, but for like a serious sounding song. But then he follows it up with, but it's okay. You don't have to pay. I've got all the change, which is kind of a double meaning in my take of it, which is, yeah, I've got no, you don't have to pay. I've got the money, right? I've got the change. But he's talking about change as in how you change when you're growing up in life. And because a lot of the song, even though it's about his son, it's also kind of about him because the chorus of the song is him saying it hurts to grow up or it sucks to grow up. And like even though yeah, his son is growing up, his kids are growing up, like, you know, Ben Folds seems like he's someone that when he probably became a parent, he probably didn't feel like he was prepared for that. And there's multiple songs where he kind of sings about that. And this is one of those songs. And, you know, I think as he's having his kid, he's watching his kid grow up in front of him. He says, it's so weird to be back here. And he's going back in the time set when he was that age. Um, and so the song, like, it hits very hard. And like, yeah, there's lyrics where he's like, yeah, maybe someday we'll both sit down and we'll have a few beers, which for some reason he always has to mention beers in his songs. I don't know why. But um, yeah, it's like a very emotional song to where the bridge, he's like, one day you'll try and you'll fly away from me, which kind of goes back to the very first verse where he sings about how he's a bird. The lyric is, I am a bird. And now it's the son being a bird who's going to one day fly and leave the nest.
I didn't really catch that callback to the first line, because I was actually gonna say, what the hell is he even talking about? That I'm a bird. That's just too silly. But that actually makes a lot of sense, and that alone just kind of enhances the lyrics for me. I do agree. I think this song has layers, which is why, even though the luckiest is sweet in ways, I just think still fighting is a lot more impactful to me.
And
And it's
it's
a
probably more
little,
relatable.
it's more relatable, yeah. And it's, I mean, you could still say it's kind of corny, but I think it's more so just like, I don't know. I think the song is just very much its own thing, if that makes sense. I know it's kind of an excuse for an explanation, but
Yeah, and like you said too, like the chorus musically is way more powerful. It's got that staccato. There's I think some strings. Like it's more powerful musically than Luckiest. So it drives home the point better, especially when he's like, "It sucks to grow up." Like every time I hear that line, it hits me so hard because we're both relatively young, and we're going through growing stages where it does very much suck, to grow up. So even though we don't have kids, you and I don't have kids to where we can relate to that aspect of the song, we could still relate to the aspect, really, of the main chorus of the song, the title, still fighting it. Years go on and you're still sometimes fighting with yourself, fighting with you growing up and being an adult. So, and like you said, it hits that extra bit of sadness where he's like, "You're so much like me. I'm sorry." Where it's like you're telling your kid, "I'm sorry that you have to be like me," because that isn't always the best thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was actually one that I ended up liking a lot more than I had thought, which
Now,
is always great.
really quick, if you have a chance, go listen to this version of the song that's featured on his like kind of greatest hits album, entitled "Best Imitation of Myself."
Why?
He released a version of the song on it where the original version of the song had an acoustic guitar intro, which
Really?
Ben Folds 5 famously did not have any guitars. And on this album, I'm sure as you notice, there's some songs with guitars, like the title track, where the main hook of the song is really electric guitar, power chords. But the song has guitars in it, and there's a version where it starts off with acoustic guitar, like a longer intro where it's just acoustic guitar.
And as I'm
And
hearing, there's also strings.
yes.
Simple,
And
but
I believe the person who played the guitar on this song is actually one of the guitarists right now for Guns N' Roses.
wait, what?
Richard Fortus. He's actually the longest member of the band other than Axl Rose and the keyboardist Dizzy Reed. Yes. Like he's playing with them live right now.
I don't know how to react to that.
Yeah. But
Interesting though. Interesting.
it's a cool version of the song. I don't think it needs the acoustic guitar. It sounds a little extra, but it is cool to hear that version of the song. But so we talked about really all the kind of slower songs. How'd you feel about some of the more upbeat ones, like Not the Same, The Same as Stan, Gone, Losing Lisa? What'd you think about those ones?
Um, Gosh, I mean, so I feel like I feel like the songs on this album are quite detailed, which I'm always a sucker for details. So I feel like really any of the songs we can jump into like a full conversation for. So why don't we go with Not the Same, because I know that's one that you really liked, if I'm not mistaken.
I do. I don't
And
know if I'd say top five, but
oh, really?
it is like it's a classic Ben Folds solo song. He plays it at all his concerts, and we'll explain why in a second. But that one has an interesting story, which I'm pretty sure you know the story.
Well, I mean, I think some of the lyrics kind of share some of the story. Um, I imagine it's something along the lines about some guy like having a bad trip at a party, and then he ends up becoming super religious. Um, and then maybe he's like a Mormon, because they'd say they come knocking at your door with this look in their eyes. You took the word and made it heard. I don't know. So it sounds like someone that just got really religious after like maybe like a mushroom
Yeah.
trip.
No, it's a true story. He was at a party hosted by, unlike the song states that the party was hosted by Ben Folds Five's bassist Robert Sledge. It was not. It was actually Darren, their drummer, who was hosting the party.
You know probably why they said it was Sledge is because they already say Darren's girlfriend in one of the Menfolds 5 songs.
He claims that he changed it to Robert's name because it just sounded better, even though I think they have the same syllables. But so they were at a party at Darren's party, and someone took LSD, climbed a tree, stayed there all night, and then when he came down, he was a born again Christian. And like you said, the rest of the song is him like being religious, and the whole hook of the song is you after that party you were not the same. So it's a kind of a funny song in the sense that like it was based off a true event. But it's a very like kind of orchestral song, wouldn't you say?
No.
No, not musically, but like,
what do you mean?
Like, okay, so live, when he does it live, there's a lot of melodies in the song. So I'm not orchestral. I guess that was the wrong word. Like, there's a lot of melodies. So when he does the song live, which we'll probably get to see next week, he's going to split the crowd in half, and he'll say the left side of the venue, you're going to sing the and then the right side of the venue, I want you guys to do the because the song goes like and he has like both sides of this venue split in half, and he has them doing different melodies to complete that part of the song during the chorus.
They're basically doing the back vocal part, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say melodies. I feel like that's more of just
not melodies, but backing vocals.
But yeah, which that sounds exciting, and I hope they do that because that sounds really fun. And I do see how the song would work for that really well.
Although he's playing with the band, usually he would do that live when it was just him and a piano. Maybe live he won't do that because he has band members who could do backing vocals. But I have a feeling people who go to Ben Folds shows a lot, they know the deal when it comes to that song. So I'd be surprised if we don't hear the crowd joining in.
Yeah, and for me, part of why I think I like this one is because it does feel kind of Ben Folds 5. So like I like the chord progression a lot, like in the main section, I guess the verse.
Yeah, what
And when
would
they
you
go
call
to the
that?
second, what do you mean?
The progression, it's like doing this like kind of it's not a dissonant chord, but it's like
It's diminished.
is it diminished?
Yeah, I think it might be like
Yeah.
half diminished. Um, and which that sounds great, and it's an interesting kind of like landscape for the song. I really dig it. And in the second verse, they do this thing where they do like these scratches on the bass with like the drums, and that's a total Ben Folds 5, 100%. And something too throughout like the album is there's times where he does like a fuzzier bass tone, and it sounds pretty sick, like Ben Folds 5. Now, when I make these comparisons, I'm not thinking he's ripping off Ben Folds 5 or anything. Obviously, his name is in the band name, but some of the qualities that I enjoyed from the 5 carry over here, and that's kind of what makes me get into this album easier. Um,
Um,
yeah, and I mean, the outro is kind of cool too. It makes me want to hear them jump back into the song when he plays the chords way up high. The sections transition really well. Um,
and there's
the
that cool
production's
part too
great.
with like the keyboard that does that really kind of high melody thing that kind of swoops up near the end. I don't know if you know what part
Yeah.
I'm talking about. Like that's cool too. Um, and since you're talking about a lot of the instrumentation on this song, I do want to point out one of the reasons I've always enjoyed this album and found it impressive is because when Ben Folds 5, when he broke up the band and he wanted to do solo albums, this was his first one, right? 2001. He does not only all the vocals and piano on this album and keyboards, he does all the bass and all the drums on this album. And
All?
yes, and he does other guitars on this. Like he has some guitar work on like the title track, and another song that I can't remember. There's the only other there's a there's a credited celloist on um Fred Jones Part Two. Obviously, the Cake lead singer on that song as well. That guitarist that's on Still Fighting It, and he's also on Rockin the Suburbs. And then that's it. Like the rest of the instrumentation is all Ben. Like he did drums with his album, he did bass, he did guitars, keyboards, everything. Him, which I
Wow. I mean,
find
I knew
impressive
he
as
played
hell.
drums because you told me a story about him like throwing a drum kit in the ocean, or in a lake or something. But I'm surprised he did it for all the songs. I feel a lot of times with like someone like Elliott Smith, he's done drums for his own songs, but depending on the song, he'll have someone else do it, whether it's for skill reasons or just for fun or whatnot. Um, so that's crazy because now when I hear the title track, that sick bass fill in the song, you know the one I'm talking about. Now I know
Yeah,
that Ben's playing it.
exactly.
So that's
Um,
cool.
which
Oh
speaking
my
of
gosh,
the
so he does the Rage Against the Machine moment in that song too?
well, I will say this. I don't know that because that Guns N' Roses guitarist who plays on Still Fighting It is also credited for additional guitar
Oh,
on the title track.
you're right, you're
That's
right.
why
My
I don't
bad.
know which one did because I don't even know. I'm thinking the main hook of the song, the guitar riff, is Ben, but that part near the end where he's mimicking Rage Against the Machine, that's probably the other guitarist. Probably.
Okay, that's a good point.
But
Still
speaking of the
sick.
title track is the most popular song from this album, like commercially, because it was the only song of his to make it on the top Billboard's modern rock charts. It peaked at number 28. I would say like the most popular song from this album by fans is probably like the luckiest, but this was like his most commercial hit. And then they also they redid the track with William Shatner when Ben did the soundtrack for the animated children's film Over the
What the hell?
Hedge. Yeah, he did the soundtrack for Over the Hedge, which you knew that
I
because
knew that, but William
covered the
Shatner?
Clash. Yeah, William Shatner during the bridge of Rockin' the Suburbs, his character does like a whole speaking bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not. It's actually included on an extended version of one of his other albums on vinyl that I have in my collection. It's not needed, but it's like if you and he changes some of the lyrics to make them more family friendly too.
Fair.
Like he doesn't, almost scream the F word in the soundtrack version of the song, but He does change some of the lyrics to make it a little bit more family appropriate. But how do you think? What do you think of the song? Because it's obviously one of the other ones you knew. It's a very guitar heavy song, which is unlike a typical Ben Folds song, Ben Folds 5. It's very like tongue in cheek, and he specifically makes fun of bands like Korn and Rage Against the Machine.
So I will say this. This song is genuinely fun and genuinely funny. And it's also the catchiest song on the album. Like, even when I'm like, I don't want to listen to this song right now, because don't get me wrong, this song gets pretty annoying because it's so catchy and pop. But like, I can't help but kind of get into it every time, at least a little bit. And like I mentioned, there was a sick bass fill in there later. Like, it was really sick. That's why I'm mentioning it. There's the whole Rage Against the Machine moment at the end, and there's also a sick guitar list before, I think, like the second verse. And so how like in Buddy Holly, there's that famous guitar lick, na 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 na.
The one that
Like,
gets memed all the time now.
yes.
Yes.
To me, I feel like that guitar lick before like the second verse or whatever is like to that quality. Like, oh yeah, that's pretty iconic right there. So I mean, yeah, like I like the song. I think it's a good song. It's a little sillier than I would like for a normal song, but there is funny lines and the music's catchy. It's a pretty lightweight song as far as like complexity. Which once again, complexity is not everything. But he starts off the song playing it kind of like it was like Smells Like Teen Spirit without he's like strumming the chords. So I'm curious for you because you're somebody that I wouldn't. Well, I guess you do kind of like funny music a little bit. Where do you put this song on the album? Because like you said, there's like 4 ballads, and then the rest are mostly just like pop songs. So this is the one with like this one's like the most pop. There's nothing jazzy about it or anything, nothing old timey.
Out of all like the kind of more singles from the album and whatnot, it's probably my least favorite. Like I like Zach and Sarah more. Well, that's not really a single, but like I mean this album, this Wikipedia page doesn't even list singles, but I'm pretty sure like Zach and Sarah was like and Annie Waits like did get radio play. I like those more than Rockin' the Suburbs. I'm kind of like you, like if I'm not in the right mood for it, it is an annoying song, especially because like it's a he said it was his attempt to kind of make fun of songs, bands like Korn, where like they had angsty music. Like the whole point of the song was to make fun of like younger angsty white guys and like those really over the top bands like Korn or like probably like Linkin Park or even Rage Against the Machine, even though they were more political. But
Well, and like Korn is pretty. I don't listen to Korn, but every Korn song I know is pretty sick. And to be fair, I think the dude's name was like Jonathan Davis.
yeah,
I think he was like a mortician or something before, so I feel like he kind of has some street cred there,
and
So
some people,
I'm down for making fun of them just because friendly fun, but
yeah, and
I
to
stand
be
for
fair,
them.
some critics have pointed out that like the lead singer from Korn, he has like a really troubled childhood, and
Exactly,
that
yeah.
wasn't known about for a while, like when they were first becoming big, and Ben probably didn't take into account when he was making the song. And this song isn't like a diss track towards Korn. He just in 2001, I think he got tired of hearing those bands all the time on the radio. And Ben Folds' music, normal music, is so opposite to bands like Korn and Rage Against the Machine and Linkin Park. So he was just writing this song kind of like to make fun of it, but also just to like kind of he almost it's kind of a diss track at himself too, because like the chorus, he's like rocking the suburbs just like Michael Jackson did, rocking the suburbs, except that he was talented. So he's almost saying that like he knows he's nowhere near as talented as Michael Jackson or Bon Jovi, which he also
Or
names
Quiet Riot.
which is Quiet Riot. I don't understand because there's so many other better bands he could have picked other than Quiet
Well,
Riot.
here's my question: are those 3 artists slash bands actually from the suburbs?
Well, I do think the song is about how like he didn't grow up poor, but he didn't grow up rich. Like
Right.
I think the song's about like middle class, and I don't really know about Bon Jovi or Michael Jackson, but especially Michael Jackson because like he had like his whole family was like talented and famous, but it probably could be said that they weren't like they had to work hard to become like
Yeah, and to my understanding,
successful.
they also had a very hard time growing up.
Yeah, so yeah, so the song's a little bit tongue in cheek and musically,
Wait,
yes,
Rock in the Suburbs was recorded in Australia? where he was living at in the
Yeah,
time?
Adelaide. Yeah, he's lived in Australia for actually a lot of his like life now. Like, I think he
What?
even got trapped there during COVID. Like, he was there and he was trying to fly back to the USA, but all the flights were like canceled because of COVID in 2020.
Is there a reason why, or
I don't know. I mean, I just know he has a house there, and I know he has a song called Adelaide, which is a fantastic song, by the way. But he just likes it there to the point where even in the song Adelaide, the song there's a lyric where someone asks him, "Why Adelaide? You could live anywhere," and then he responds that because I want to. I really, really want to. So I don't know,
that's kind of
but
funny.
yeah, Rockin the Suburbs, it's a fun track. It's a fun title track. It's a little long. It's the longest song on the album, 5 minutes. Doesn't need to be that long, but the Rage Against the Machine part at the end is funny.
And I think
Um,
why that works so well, the rage part, is
because
because
you love
like,
Rage.
well, yeah, because I love Rage Against the Machine. But as opposed to maybe like making fun of Korn, who is a band that, yeah, is a little more emotional, probably kind of more trauma based. Sorry if I'm summarizing Korn and completely inaccurate. Um, but like with Rage, it's like, yeah, it's a very political band. Like pretty much every song's about politics. So him at the beginning of the song talking about getting upset that someone cut him off in a McDonald's line, that contrast is so comically different that it just feels 100% fun, lighthearted, no actual diss at all. If anything, just making fun of himself or just having fun.
Yeah, no,
So,
I agree. It's
so we still
it.
have a few other songs to touch on this album that I definitely want to get to.
Oh yeah,
Um,
for sure. I am very. I know some of these songs we're talking about in length, and because unlike the last episode did, Mark Lanigan, like those songs, the lyrics are more up to interpretation. These songs are like sometimes very specific, and there's sometimes more instrumentation happening. But I'm very curious about some of these deep cuts. If you prefer them over some of the bigger songs like "Gone," "Center Stand," "Losing Lisa," um, how you like those songs, which I do consider those like deeper cuts.
so out of those three that you just mentioned, Losing Lisa would be my favorite of those three. Something though that I have to get off my chest right off the back, right off the bat, is going into the chorus. There's like the drum fill that's doing like triplets, da 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 da, and then they go into the chorus. That transition and beginning of the vocals of the chorus sound just like "Happy Together" from the Turtles.
And "Losing Lisa,"
Yes,
I can hear that. You know what I
hundred
hear in
percent.
the pre-chorus? There's like
What?
the line where he's like, hold on, let me actually pull up the lyrics so I don't butcher it because I think it only happens once in the song. Um, I think it's the second pre-chorus. Let me see. Pulling up "Losing Lisa." It's the part where he's like, "I am mesmerized by tiny lines." That walk down is totally Good Vibration. It's totally Beach Boys.
Wait, let me listen to this.
It's in the second pre-chorus.
Wait, are you sure?
Yeah.
Mm, let me.
The
Oh,
part
hang
the
on. Wait, hang on. Oh, yeah. That one little
yeah,
vocal
and
rundown.
I mean, even if it wasn't intentional, like, and I there's a lot of this album instrumentally where I do like, especially "Gone" too, like both these songs have that like kind of 60s, sometimes doo-wop kind of sound to them. And like that vocal melody where he's like, "I'm mesmerized by tiny lines," or even I think the first time he sings it, where he sings, "Before you go, you ought to know." Like that walk down melody is totally Beach Boys. It's totally Brian Wilson.
Just, yeah, I will say honestly, like even with his newest album, sometimes I do get some kind of like Beach Boys elements. I'm not sure how intentional because it doesn't sound like an artist who's actually influenced by the Beach Boys. Um, but I mean, there's other artists who also have a lot of great things with like harmonies and melodies. Like sounds like Stevie Wonder is one of his influences, and he's always doing like those type of like complex melodies and whatnot, fun stuff. But yeah, I do agree with you. I didn't know if I would have noticed it, but yeah, like with Fired and with Losing Lisa, there is kind of old timey sounds in them, which is interesting, and I think it does give the album some cohesion in that way alone. Um, I didn't quite understand all the lyrics. It felt a little more vague in Losing Lisa,
Um,
but
I think it's simply
it's
just a breakup song. Like I tried reading this morning and to see if it meant something more, but I think it's just literally a breakup song. Like he's losing Lisa, which sounds like in this song, it's just like, significant other. I think the Black Tears lyrics in the chorus is like mascara. Like if you're wearing mascara and you cry, it'll, it'll
I
streak.
don't know how I didn't even consider that.
I know I
I guess
didn't really either. I always thought, yeah, I don't know. I always liked the line because I thought it was like some type of like meaning that was like secret, but like no, I think it's literally just about like how someone's mascara would run down your face if you were crying while wearing it.
yeah,
But
I
she's
feel
per
silly for not
crying
really
because he's
noticing that.
saying losing Lisa. But yeah, like it's a very simple song lyrically. It's just like
Which is fine. I don't diss the lyrics. I don't rank the song lower because of the lyrics. I just noticed it was a little more vague than a lot of Ben Folds 5 songs.
yeah, musically though, and like vocally, this is in my top five. I love losing Lisa. I think it's
It's
the most, besides Carrie and Kathy, I think it's the most underrated from the album.
it's a very simple song, but it's very effective.
It's so fun.
Um,
I think there is a little electric guitar in the bridge. Then the instrumental section is like a little funky, like little. Now that I'm thinking back to it,
really?
yeah, like I don't know, it's before or after he does the little piano solo, which is just him kind of doing the melody of the chorus. There definitely is
Right.
a little guitar, like it's
Oh
very
yeah,
like
I hear it.
light.
I hear it
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah. Like I think that's him because it's not credited to someone else on the album, which is cool. I love the drums. Like I just like how upbeat it is. I love like in the chorus, like after he says the first time he's like black tears are falling down her face, and I am wrong. When he says the word wrong and the chord changes, like I just think it sounds great. Like I love everything about the song. I mean, like yeah, lyrically it's not super deep, but it's just a breakup song. And but it's like a fun breakup song, which you don't always get.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, I mean, I was just kind of saying like I think it's a really straightforward song, but like the chorus and the music in it's great. The bridge I feel like doesn't really add much to the song, but it's pleasant to hear. Now that you
Yeah,
mentioned
it
the
doesn't
guitar
do a
part,
lot.
it is
Yeah.
nice. Um, and honestly though, I really like the chord that it ends on. Like that's just a nice touch, a little extra detail that kind of does bring the song higher on, in my ranking. It is one of my favorites for sure. I also probably would put it above Carrie and Kathy.
It's hard. I think because actually losing Lisa is like I said, it's top five. It could be like my third favorite. I can like I think Karen Kathy's the better song because lyrically it's so like Karen Kathy is so much better than losing Lisa lyrically because it's Karen Kathy tells like such a heartfelt story and there's a lot to it. And musically it's fantastic too. I love like the strings in Karen Kathy. It's very dramatic at points.
But you kind of got to be in the mood just
The
because it
mood
is
or
such a
losing
heavy
Lisa,
song.
every time losing Lisa comes on, unless I'm like in a very sour mood, it always like makes me happy when I hear losing Lisa.
No,
Um,
totally fair.
Ascend to Stand, I kind of was thinking that would be one you liked, but you made a comment earlier in the episode that made it seem like it wasn't one of your favorites.
Yeah, so I have mixed feelings about that song. I like things about it, and then I also don't like things about it. So, kind of just something to begin with the song is that that main like piano theme that starts off the song, which I think is just the chorus, right? Um, it's cool, but it feels kind of disconnected from the next section a little bit. Just the first transition from there into the verse. Um, it I'm not sure if you're familiar with the song, but it almost kind of feels like "Morning Is Broken" from Cat Stevens, just because it's like there's a big piano hook and then there's like the song, and then there's the piano hook, there's the song.
I don't know that one, but I'll have to look it up later.
But that being said, the more I heard it, it felt more
I
natural
totally
and
get what you
whatnot.
mean. On first listen to the song, I actually didn't love it because of that reason. Because like it feels like the song's gaining energy, and then the verse it totally like eliminates the energy.
And in general, the verses are fairly forgettable to me.
They're a little bit
But
like Fred Jones, but like a little bit just more peppier.
right, but what makes it all worth it is that transition. He hits like the falsetto, which almost gives like a Jesus Land vibe. I mean, it doesn't really sound like Jesus Land, but it's kind
Especially
of
that,
like,
yeah, especially that verse where he's like, and now what? I can't even. I was gonna do it, but I can't. The watch it all go down part, like
yeah, I
that
think I
part.
know the one.
Yeah, like that part. The vocals are like fantastic. It is, and it does kind of remind me of his other song, Jesus Land. I see that.
Yeah, and And that being said, I do like the chorus. It has a cool vibe, um, with like the falsetto and like these like kind of energetic, like kind of like how Mess from Ben Folds 5 has like this
Yes,
real kind of
I was
intensity,
I was gonna
determined
say
sound.
this. The way he plays the piano in the chorus of the song really reminds me of the way he plays. I'm so glad you brought that up. It totally reminds me of the way he plays Mess,
Which is one which is a great song.
which is, yeah, one of our favorites from that album.
Yeah, and what isn't like on like one of like the last choruses or something, there's like a banjo someone's just totally ripping that.
Yeah. I'm glad you pointed that
It's
out too, because it's which I guess is him because it's not credited to someone else. I don't know if it's a banjo or if it's like a weirdly tuned guitar, but yeah.
which was kind of cool. I mean, some of the details on some of the songs, such as this one, are not questionable because they don't work. I'm just not really sure if I would have done it personally or how much it actually adds to the song. For example, there's like I think it's in like the left ear. There's like some digital noises at the end and in the bridge, which is kind of cool. And I do like the bridge in the song actually. The
Yeah, where they're just like Stan.
yeah, with the little keyboard melody, like that is kind of a cool part. And that keyboard sound reminds me of Underground. Um, but it doesn't remind me of like, is it at the end of Underground or like a different song? They have like that I don't even know what it is. Is it like a melodica or something?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, as long as you know, I feel happy.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Uh, and two more things I have about the song. One was the bass at the end of the song. Um, it's very like thumpy. It sounds like digital though. I remember writing it down that it kind of reminded me of Les Claypool slightly, but I could not. I could not tell you. I can't remember the bass line top of my head. Um, but anywho's though, the last thing I was going to say about it is I don't know how I feel about the lyrics. I definitely like them more than like Fred Jones Part Two. Once again, not because Fred Jones Part Two has bad lyrics, but I don't know. Maybe just because of the delivery of the song, it doesn't pull me in. But with the Son of Sound, I kind of like some of the lyrics, but also, I mean, come on, textbook hippie man, get rest while you can't.
Well,
Am I
it's
dense?
it's there's not a lot to this song other than it's about someone named Stan who used to be this like hippie guy and was against, like, he was maybe like kind of rebellious in his youth, but then over the course of like time, he actually like, maybe started working at a job and he became a part of the problem, which is why there's a line where they sing, Stan, once you wanted revolution, now you're the institution.
Which that's a pretty good line. Ain't
So
gonna
it's
lie.
kind of, and he even sings, it's no fun to be the man. So it's about someone who like was like a hippie and was against the government and stuff like that, but now he's a part of the problem. And that's it. There's really not much to it. Yeah, the lyric
He,
is
like
not
mentions the
as,
war in the beginning,
yeah, it's
which
not
kind
as
of
hard hitting as like still fighting it or carrying Kathy.
yeah, the meaning felt a little diluted,
Yeah.
maybe just because of the chorus being decent length but without a lot of lyrical substance to it.
Yeah,
So
and the only other song we haven't talked about, I think, also is kind of simple, as which is "Gone." Like "Gone" is kind of another breakup song, you know.
yeah, and I don't think Gone's bad. I like Gone. It's kind of like it doesn't sound like Clouds with Ellipsis, but it kind of feels like that from the new album. Like
What it
it's
have
a
it,
solid song that is near the beginning of the album, but it's not necessarily one like Losing Lisa where I'm like, "Oh, sick, Losing Lisa."
yeah,
I'm more
and they're
like,
both in the same
"Gone,
time
cool."
signature, right?
What,
Because
3/4?
"Gone," yeah, right.
Yeah, Gone's definitely in 3/4. Let me
I
see
think
Clouds
I,
with
I think "Clouds
Ellipses.
with Ellipses" is too.
Let me
Either
see
that,
here.
well, it's either that one or it's "Fragile." I can't remember. It might actually be "Fragile." I might be wrong.
No, Clouds with Ellipsis is in 3/4 as well.
Okay, yeah. So that
Okay,
that is
that's
that
actually
is
a
nice.
good comparison there. I didn't
Yeah.
even catch that.
Yeah, and I do think "Gone" sounds very much like the blueprint of the album, where like there's clear bass, there's clear drums, there's those harmonies, or there's like if you know staccato part in the pre-chorus, it's catchy. Like again, it's kind of like Losing Lisa, where lyrically it doesn't stand out, but musically it's just very. I do think "Gone" has the most kind of throwback sound. Like it sounds like it could be like a doo-wop song from the '60s, especially that part where they're like, if you go, you should know that part. But It's a
Yeah,
fun song.
I like it. I think the only reason I don't really put it that high on the album is because there's no standout element. I feel like for most of the songs, there's definitely elements that stand out. So like whether, Zach and Sarah, it's maybe I'm just like, well, it starts off with that descending piano thing. Like that's very like memorable about the song, or Still Fighting It starts off with a stupid lyric. Just kidding, it's not stupid. But it's like there's things that stand out with the songs, and Gone doesn't really stand out to me. It's kind of forgettable. But when I hear it, I enjoy it, and I do think it does fit well on the album.
Yeah, it's, I think a little bit more enjoyable than like probably like, well, Fired I think has a better chorus, but Gone definitely has a better verse and bridge.
Right, like the highs and Fired. And that's the thing with Ben Folds songs for me. And Ben Folds 5 sometimes too, but especially with Ben Folds solo songs like of this maybe era, some of the songs have really, really high highs, but the lows are very, I don't know. They kind of leave a little sour taste in my mouth. But honestly, there wasn't really too many lows on this album other than like maybe like The Luckiest and Fred Jones. The other songs I do like a lot of things in them, and there wasn't much I didn't care for.
Yeah.
What one song that I did mention, but we didn't really go over as much is Annie Waits, and that actually is one of my favorites off the album. I'm not sure if that's surprising or not. I know I said I used to think it was annoying, but I like it because it's really catchy. It's catchy enough to kind of make up for maybe kind of the loose lyrics. Like I feel like they could have been condensed maybe. But I like it, and it kind of reminds me of like You Don't Know Me, where it's like super catchy. It's rhythmically placed, so it's easy to like groove with. And I really love the B section and Annie Waits. And just it's structured really well. I think it's a well written pop song that's interesting, flows well. It's got a good song structure, and I think it's a banger. It's a good one. And of course, I'll love a song about Tom Waits' wife.
It's his wife name. Oh, I get it. God, you're dumb. I get it. I was about to ask a stupid question like, is his name Annie? But then I get it. No, I love Annie Waits. It's a great way to start the album. Very catchy, very much the sound of the whole album. And then lyrically, I think it's great. I won't get into it too much, but like,
It's a little more straightforward, but it's
it's
good
well,
lyrically.
the first half it just sounds like someone named Annie who's waiting for someone like on a date, probably. And then she starts getting worried that like maybe like there's even the lyric where it's like, you know, maybe he's been hurt. Like, what's the line? Like, maybe he's possibly even been hurt. Something like
Yeah,
that.
maybe he's been seriously hurt.
Yeah, like maybe,
Would
and
that
that's
be
why.
worse?
Yeah, is that why he's not there on the date? But then like eventually in the second verse, the song's actually being told through like Ben's perspective of how like he's kind of obsessed with Annie, but she's not obsessed with him. She's obsessed with this other guy that she's waiting on or other person. And there's like the lyric where he's like, maybe when we're both old, like they could be together. Like, if they're so old and they don't each have a partner, maybe they can be each other's partner. But then at the end, it's like Annie waits, but not for me. Like I'm not her desire. So I do think it has an interesting kind of concept.
Yeah, I think it's lyrically like a much better approach than like Gone. Or I shouldn't say much better, like it's like Night and Day or anything.
Yeah, because
But
it's not just like a breakup song. It's about more like intricate parts of a relationship.
I guess I meant to say Losing Lisa. I said Gone on accident.
Oh
But both of
yeah,
those songs really.
sure.
I feel like this one's a little more interesting. And I think this does a great thing where it's like the lyrics, there's room for interpretation, but there are specific lines like classic Ben Folds where he says Friday bingo, pigeons in the park. Like that's nothing crazy or too zany, but it's just one of the details that elevates the song, but it doesn't kill the replay value by being, a stale joke or anything.
Um, yeah.
So there's
So
one thing I gotta know though.
yeah,
My mind cannot comprehend this. I don't even know how I don't understand how this can be in your top 20 albums of
is
all time.
oh I thought you were
First
gonna.
off, as an album, and then secondly, as your pick for like top 20 albums. I don't
I
understand.
thought you were gonna say you couldn't understand how this album came out on 9/11 because it did. Uh,
Well, why is this album getting crazier and crazier as we go
for some
along?
reason, I know the pointless fact that this album and Nickelback's Silver Side Up were both released on September 11th, 2001, which is um probably like the worst day you could release a new album because you know.
You know, it's kind of crazy too. I
What?
just because you had sent me something on Instagram or whatever yesterday, and I was opening up like your reply this morning, and I had that meme showed up where they're like thinking about the guy that bowled a perfect game on 9/11. It's just like this picture
God,
of this old guy with the 300 score.
God. Yeah, I have seen that before. Um, but no, to answer your question, why is this one of my favorite albums? Why is it maybe my top 20? Because it was when I got into Ben Folds, I didn't connect with every Ben Folds 5 song and album. So when I heard he has solo stuff, I listened to that, and that was a little bit more, I don't know, digestible to me. Like it was easier to get into. And it was a time and place in my life where I was like kind of really starting to change up my music styles and what I like to listen to. And I just think this album, even though on Wikipedia is considered alternative rock, I think this is like I see it as almost just a straight pop album. Like
Oh, it's totally just a
maybe
pop album to me.
maybe pop rock because there are some guitars and there's drums and stuff, and there's not
I
like
mean,
a lot of
"Rockin the
synths.
Suburbs" the only
But
rock song on the album. Come
true, but
on.
like songs like Not the Same, or even like Zach and
Oh,
Sarah, like they're driving songs, like
I
they
guess
have a
not
lot
the
of
same.
energy. But um I just think it's like a perfect produced pop album. I mean, he mostly produced it. He had someone else that helped him. Some guy named Ben Gross or Ben Gross, who surprisingly helped mix Red Hot Chili Peppers cover of Higher Ground and helped mix the Flaming Lips She Don't Use Jelly, which, as we talked about before, Ben Full 5 covered later down the
The
road.
lore is kind of crazy for this album.
Yeah, but I find it so impressive that he did most instrumentation himself. I don't think there's a bad song, even if Fred Jones is not my favorite. I love the different styles of music on, even though there's not a ton. Like there's just different types of songs. There's happy songs, there's sad songs, there's the rocker. Like I think the vocals are top notch. I think the lyrics for the most part are top notch. I find it interesting listen. It's upbeat. It puts me in a good mood whenever I listen. Like I don't know. Is it his like best work? Maybe not. Like maybe you can say Whatever Never Amen is a better album. Maybe you can even say Unarized Biography is a better. Maybe even the reunion album Benefit Flies, or maybe even his most recent solo album is better. Songs for
I love
Silverman.
that. I love that opinion.
That his newest one is better.
Yeah.
It's more mature, and I know I think you've heard all of Songs for Silverman, the following solo album released a couple years later.
I
That
could
one
tell you
has
how half the songs go.
but that one has a lot of more maturity. But this album is just like fun. Like I don't know, I don't have a lot of just like kind of fun pop albums in my top like 10 or 20, but this would be my favorite out of those. Like I can't think of other albums that like there might be other albums that have pop influences like Coldplay's Viva La Vida, which is one of my favorite albums of all time. But that has a lot more straightforward like rock and guitar and that one has darker songs and there's a lot of themes and the lyrics and music. This Ben Folds album is just like a fun album. Like I don't know, I'm always happy to listen to it.
I
So,
mean,
but
that's fair.
I'm glad you liked it. It sounded like at least, and that probably helps that you already like a lot of Ben Folds stuff. I am curious what if you had to pick 3 songs off this album, what were like your 3 favorites in no order?
Annie Waits, not the same, and I don't want to say Zach and Sarah because these are like the 3 songs I already knew before the album.
No, but
I
they're
I
good
promise
ones.
that's not why I'm picking them, but I think those are probably my 3 favorites. If I had to go a top 5, I'd probably do like Losing Lisa and Carrie and Kathy. I think I would add.
I mean, that's kind of similar to mine. I mean, I wouldn't have not the same, but I definitely would have Losing Lisa, Karen Kathy, Zach and Sarah, Annie Waits. Like those are good songs. And you'll be happy to know, assuming Ben Folds keeps the set list the same when we see him next week with his band, his touring band, you're gonna hear, besides almost hearing most of his new album, you're gonna hear Not the Same. In the encore, you're gonna hear Annie Waits. He ends the whole show with Zach and Sarah. He will play Still Fighting It. And for some reason, he brought out as deep cuts, he's playing The Ascent of Stan and Losing Lisa.
Oh, whoa. Okay. Well,
So
that's great. I'm looking forward to it.
yeah, I mean, you're gonna hear basically all your favorites from this album. So except for like Carrie and Kathy, which I would love, but he needs to play that one probably like an orchestra, which he does a lot. But um, so yeah, so to kind of segue next week after we see him, we're going to record. This episode won't come out to the last Monday of the month, but our last episode of the month will be our review of seeing Ben Folds live. So that'll be fun. And yeah, I'm glad you enjoy this album. You've heard now most of Ben Folds' albums. The only ones you need to listen to, and I'll probably at least give you one of them down the road on the podcast, is his collab with British author Nick Hornby and their album Lonely Avenue. Ben Folds' other solo album, Way to Normal, which was technically his like last like non-orchestra album since before his most recent one, and then technically his last previous album, which was called So There, which he did with like a small orchestra kind of set. So, but you've not heard like a lot of his albums. So, but don't worry, you'll be getting one of those at least down the road.
Well, I'll be ready for it.
And yeah, I think that ends this episode and this album for album series this month. We hope everyone enjoyed it. I already know my pick I'm giving you for next month. But we'll probably keep that unless you already know yours. We'll probably keep it a secret at least for another episode.
We'll hold off. We'll hold off.
Yeah, just to finalize our
just to
decisions.
Be sure.
Yeah. But yeah, stay tuned for next week's Ben Folds review, assuming the show happens, no issues or whatever. But and then yeah, next month we don't really have ideas yet besides album for album, but we have a couple tricks up our sleeve. So, but we appreciate you listening to this episode, and you will be hearing from us soon. So until then, bye-bye.